In this episode, I talk with Dyer, who is the author of Esoteric Hollywood. He's also on the Alex Jones podcast. He has his own YouTube channel as well. He talks a lot about philosophy. And yeah, in this episode, we had a really interesting chat about his book, Esoteric Hollywood, and we went deep into the occult, the CIA, MK Ultra. He does a good... Actually, he has the best Terence McKenna impersonation I've heard so far, so you might enjoy that one. And just, yeah, we touched on psychedelics, the downfall of materialism, atheism, and yeah, you can check out the timestamps in the description box below. And if you do enjoy this podcast and want to support us, feel free to go on patreon.com/yourmatetom and gain exclusive access to our podcast with me and my girlfriend. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoy this podcast, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye. I like to just kind of focus on like Esoteric Hollywood, the Great Reset. I know you've been making videos on that lately.
It's on me, yeah.
Yeah, man. So yeah, tell us, like, what was this protest like anyway? And how did you end up meeting up with Alex Jones?
So, I mean, I've listened to Alex for a long time, all the way back to about 2003 when he was discussing the history of Skull and Bones, Bohemian Grove. That was my introduction to him. And I was kind of awake to conspiracy type material, the New World Order, that kind of stuff. But I never really got that deep into it until I saw his stuff. I got into, there was a documentary at that time going around called Loose Change. I don't know if you've seen that, but so I got introduced to like a whole other level through him. And then I didn't know him at the time, but just started reading more and more. And then over time, built my work, my essay, video catalog. And then they reached out to me and said, would you want to come on and host Fourth Hour? So for the last 4 or 5 months, I've hosted the Fourth Hour at least once every week or two. And then got invited down to that protest. And I didn't really know what to expect. I haven't really ever been to a protest that I can remember. So it was all a new experience. I got there, and as soon as I walk up, they're like, here's the bullhorn, start bullhorning. So I just grabbed the bullhorn, and I don't even remember what I said because it took us like all night to drive down there. So I was out of my mind, just tired. And,
what was the protest about?
So Georgia was one of the key areas to where there was election shenanigans.
Right.
So the first 2 days there was about, I don't know, a few hundred people. And then the third day there was thousands of people showed up. So it turned into this huge thing. I literally had no idea what to expect, but so we're just like riding around. We're going to the governor's mansion. We're protesting outside his mansion, and there's security detail everywhere. You feel like you're some kind of like important person because there's guys with like earpieces running around like, we've got it right here. We're doing a sweep. We're doing a sweep. All right, it's clear. Come on. Literally like that, like nonstop the whole time. So spent a whole day with Alex eating hamburgers and doing an interview. It was wild. So that's what it was about.
He seems like a fascinating character, man. He's like my favorite guest on the JRE for sure.
He is.
Is he who he is on the podcast? Yeah.
He's
okay.
The same in person as he is on shows. He's just a ball of energy. He's just like,
And how did he end up inviting you over? Is it because of the Esoteric Hollywood that you wrote, or?
No, okay. So I've talked about geopolitics and all of that stuff as well as Hollywood for a long time. It's just that I focused for a long time on the Hollywood stuff, and we did a TV show based on my book. So that was my main focus, but I was also talking about that other stuff. And I think it was just his producer and people at his operation that liked my material, and they'd watched a bunch of the debates that I'd done. So I did debates with like Muslims and atheists, and so that kind of gained some audience traction. And I think all of those together was what led to the invite to come, do some hosting and then come down to Georgia and whatnot.
How many debates have you done, do you reckon?
Well, we do them all the time, but prominent public debates, I would say we did. The first one was Adam Kokesh was my first public debate. Then JF was a big one. Then I did Stefan Molyneux, and I did Matt Dillahunty, and I did some neo-pagan dudes, and then I did a couple more atheists. And
was that
and
like
then the last
Styx Hammer 666 or whatever?
Oh yeah, I forgot about Styx. That was more of a discussion. It wasn't really a formal debate, but And then, yeah, I did one with Dr. Shabir Ali, who's a pretty well-known Muslim apologist. So that all just kind of snowballed. After the JF debate, it was like, do another debate, do another debate.
You should, because man, your Terence McKenna impression is like the best I've heard online. You should do like a pretend debate.
Well, if you'd like me to do my Terence, I'd be glad to do it. The only problem is that I have to consult with the mushroom before I actually did it.
So, Terence, what do they mean when all is one?
Well, all is one is what it means. It means that we're all one. It means that you're me and I'm you, and we're all one happy family, in the words of Barney.
Oh man, it's so good. It's funny because like I've been like talking about Terence McKenna lately because I think a lot of people in the psychonaut community don't realize that at the end of his life, the mushrooms turned on him. So he had like a really horrific trip, and he completely stopped.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he ended up completely stopped going to that that space, and because I was talking to someone who was in his circle, so people listening take it for what it's worth, but he knew people who was in his inner circle, and apparently the mushrooms turned on him because he wasn't like he was kind of just taking like just going in for the knowledge without kind of giving back, sort of thing. I don't know, take that for what it's worth, but something fascinating.
So I was at a conference. I spoke at a thing last year in LA. It was at a movie studio ranch, and they put me right next to his widow.
Oh,
and
wow.
the whole time I didn't know I was next to her. I would have gone and talked to her if I'd known who she was, but I just saw some woman over there, and she had like a chunk of a tree branch that's supposed to get you stoned or something. And I was like,
what?
There's this woman over here trying to get people to like lick a tree branch or something. I was like, this is crazy. And then afterwards, the people who scheduled the event, they were like, did you go talk to Terrence's widow? And I was like, what? Why didn't you tell me?
So that was his last wife? From what I understand, that he
I don't even remember who it was.
Yeah,
but it was his widow.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, I would love to, because I haven't ended up delving into your book quite yet, but I'm really fascinated about the whole concept of esoteric Hollywood and the cult symbology that goes behind it. Like, can you just go into what is Hollywood? How did it get created? And we can just start from there.
Well, Hollywood, I think everybody thinks is just well, actually, nowadays probably everybody's pretty aware of it being kind of a propaganda engine. And it's not just a money-making machine or a creative arts project. It's a lot more than that. And when I started my work on the book, it was actually out of my grad work. I was studying intelligence agencies, James Bond, propaganda, and movies. And so when I first heard about this idea that there's a deep intelligence connection to Hollywood, I kind of thought that was out there. This was about 2006 or 7. I was like, no, okay, maybe. And then the more that I dove into it from an academic perspective, like the more links that you would turn up, the more you would find out, oh, this famous A-list actor was actually a spy. Cary Grant did spying, Jimmy Stewart did spying. So all these people, it's like, how are all of these A-list actors spies? And then you find out that even in the Soviet Union, like Stalin had famous actresses that were his right-hand spies.
Oh,
there
wow.
were German actresses that were famous spies.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so the more that I kept turning this up just in mainline histories, I was like, something's going on here. And I always liked movies. So I had a few classes in college that dealt with Oliver Stone films. And of course, Oliver Stone is well known for conspiracies in Hollywood in his films. And so I read a bunch of his stuff or books about Stone films, took a few classes on film theory that analyzed Stone films. And I was like, this needs to be a book. So I just started churning out essays for about 10 years. And then I got offer to put it into a book. And really, it's just a reflection of looking at movies on multiple levels. So what I'm trying to do in the book is not just look at like, oh, there's an all-seeing eye here, so maybe it means something. Like that is there sometimes, but I'm interested in all the different levels to where, is this movie propaganda? Does it have an occult angle? Does this relate to like corporate propaganda? Does this relate to intelligence agencies? Does the Pentagon have a relationship to this movie? So I just tried to throw it all into a multi-layered approach to analyzing film.
Wow. What kind of movies stick out to mind that have the most kind of profound symbology behind it?
So probably some of the ones that you would expect. Like I started out with some of the more popular essays that I'd written. Like I did Kubrick, obviously all the Kubrick, well, most of the Kubrick important ones, like Eyes Wide Shut, The Shining, 2001. That's like the first 80 pages of the book. And then I moved on to some of the like the alien entities kind of stuff with Spielberg, and how if we look back to H.G. Wells and these famous science fiction writers, they were actually propagandists. H.G. Wells is one of the earliest and most successful propagandists. He would actually do wartime propaganda. And that was partly why his science fiction was so successful, was because he knew how to tap into the zeitgeist. And I don't think it's accidental that Hollywood has really promoted, you know, the whole alien mythos. So I had to delve into Spielberg films. I did a lot of the dystopian stories that seem to be really predictive of where we're going now. So I did Logan's Run. I did Zardoz, Labyrinth. Well, that's not, Labyrinth isn't dystopian, but I did Blade Runner, Prometheus. And then some of the weird kind of silly 80s stuff like Neverending Story, Legend. And several Bond films and how they relate to, because I was actually writing my thesis on Ian Fleming and James Bond. Right. So I did Moonraker, Moonraker, Spectre, the new one, and kind of tied all that in together. Diamonds Are Forever, and then I did a bunch of Hitchcock and David Lynch stuff. So really the whole first book was centered around the big directors and their films. And then in the second book, I moved into more thematic topics of like the mafia and their relationship to mafias in Hollywood, films that deal with mind control and geopolitics, the war on terror and how it transitioned into where we are now with just straight up dystopian stories all the time.
Yeah, man. It seems to be everywhere. Very popular now. And like, are they doing this on purpose? Like injecting all this symbolic, are like they trying to tell us subconsciously what's going on, or are they just trying to put some stories in to kind of make us think a certain way, or is it all the above? What's going on?
It's all the above. That's a great question. Like, so in the second book, like right away, what I did was I looked at there was a FOIA request a couple of years ago that people put in to figure out to what degree major government agencies in the U.S. had invested in film propaganda. Mm-hmm. And it turns out they got back 4,000 pages of documents that the Pentagon, the CIA, the military, all of these different entities had in over 800 movies and 1,000 TV shows, they had paid to have direct propaganda messages put in. This is over the last few years. And that's just what's known. That's just one FOIA request.
What organization is this? Is this like CIA or what's going on?
It's all of them. So okay. The FOIA request, here, I'll read what it says. We recently put in our FOIA request for documents relating to the U.S. government's influence in major TVs and movies. We got 4,000 in response. And if you want to read their book, I'm citing, or actually it's an essay. It's Alford and Secker's book, Documents Expose Hollywood Movies Promoting War on Behalf of the Pentagon, CIA, and NSA. That's actually an online piece, but they have a book about this. But it's Pentagon, CIA, NSA, and military. And it's movies as innocuous as, well, obviously the Marvel and DC entities, Transformers, James Bond, and then TV shows, Hawaii Five-0, America's Got Talent, Oprah, Jay Leno, Cupcake Wars. I'm serious. So they have paid
Cupcake Wars.
Positive, right? Military and Pentagon messages into something even as ridiculous as Cupcake Wars. Isn't that crazy?
I haven't even heard of that, but it sounds ridiculous.
It was just some stupid like Food Channel show where they were, I don't know, like beating the shit out of each other over cupcakes or something.
Oh, and you said Marvel, man. I love Marvel movies. Well, like, what is Marvel saying? Like, what's the symbology behind the MCU?
Well, right. So this, the documents just talked about what they had paid. I don't know that it doesn't list the specific messages, but I covered a few Marvel things in my essays, and my speculation would be that You kind of have in the Avengers installments the notion of nation states giving way to international organizations. That would be my guess, because a lot of this propaganda relates to moving into globalization, moving into away from nation states and into a global kind of situation.
So that's what
that would be
Civil
my guess,
War was
but
about,
I don't know specifically.
to give their rights to the government. Yeah.
Exactly.
Huh. And what you mentioned aliens, like they're pushing the alien agenda. Why is this? What do you believe aliens are?
Well, so at the movie level, I believe they're promoting that stuff on behalf of a larger agenda that actually there is documentation for this. There's a 1968 Brookings Institute paper, which is one of the top think tanks relating to NASA, where they talked about that if there was the promotion of the alien myth and narrative, that it would shake all the previous Western civilization belief structure. So the Bible, anything like that still remains, would be gone, and it would merge a lot easier with the Darwinian mythos to promote a new grand narrative. So that's a 1968 document that it's in my book, but it's referenced in Brenda Densler's book, who's an academic who studies alien cults. And she dug up this 1968 think tank paper about how to utilize that. But I can give you a more recent example, which Klaus Schwab, the top World Economic Forum Davos globalist, when they put out their 8-point plan as to what the Great Reset would be, point 8 in the written version, you can read that article, the point 8 was alien life. So my speculation is that they want to bring about a new mythology to help explain man's origins and man's destiny that would include aliens. Now, what are they? I believe there's multiple layers going on with the alien stuff. I think that there are entities. I think they do exist. I think that they're spiritual beings. They exist on another plane. I think that that's what a lot of people who have the DMT experience or the LSD experience encounter. I've had LSD experience. I've had bad trips. I've encountered those kinds of entities, so I know that there is a reality to that experience. I think it is ultimately demonic in many cases, not every case. I'm not saying everybody's spiritual experiences are necessarily evil. In my case, I think it was a demonic experience.
Right, like different species, almost like different species, do you think? Like there are certain aliens that are perhaps more malevolent and some that are more neutral, or do you think it's all part of the same thing?
Well, I don't believe that it's like extra biological entities. I think that my view is spiritual entities. So right, I think like that there's angels and demons is basically the same thing that people are calling the sort of out-of-body alien type experience. That's my view. So if you read a book like, there's an old work that you would like called On the Celestial Hierarchy by Dionysius. It's a early Christian period work where he's analyzing the hierarchies in the universe that exist in the spiritual realm. And he is influenced to a degree by Neoplatonic thought, but Dionysius traces out these different angelic hierarchies that are both good and evil. So I would say that there are good and evil spiritual entities, but I would also say that I think a lot of the ET alien type of stuff, if you read the Psychonauts, as I'm sure you have, you've probably read those guys a lot more than I have. I've read Lilly, McKenna, Leary at length, but I think that what they're talking about is typically sort of the demonic type of stuff.
Right. I actually haven't read I never got too much into Terence McKenna, actually.
Oh.
No. Like I've like watched a few of his YouTube videos, and he has some interesting perspectives, but ultimately I think he's off the mark on a lot of things that I don't agree with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting because I've actually seen a UFO once. This is completely sober, by the way. I don't know what it was. I didn't have like an experience like meeting a being necessarily, but it was definitely weird, unidentified flying object. It's the only way I can describe it. I don't know what that was about. And I saw it with 3 other friends as well during the broad daylight, which was like the most bizarre part of it. Yeah, because in Australia there's a lot of those sightings.
Is there really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a multiple levels to that type of stuff. I think that there are real entities that can appear. I think that there are government agencies and structures that promote an alien mythology, sometimes for ideological, psychological warfare, sometimes for cover. Actually, I think that if you look at some of the bases where the alien nonsense is promoted in the U.S., I actually think they're doing like drug trafficking.
Oh, really?
And other black. Yeah. So they use the alien thing as a cover. Oh, Area 51. Ooh, no, it's not aliens. They're doing like black market type stuff there. So that's my theory on that. And then I also think that.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, the other component is deception.
Okay.
If you watch that documentary Mirage Men,
no,
which I think is a great documentary that they interview a lot of the former counterintelligence people who were involved in the alien jibber jabber, and they just talk about how what we do is we pick people to feed them disinfo, and so I think that it's all those. It's not one thing going on. It's all those things.
Right. It's like lots of things, like plants, for example. Some are medicine, some are poison. Same with humans. Some are good, some are bad, some are neutral. So it would make sense that in the alien or the spiritual dimension that it's probably a variety
and
of all
the
these
government
things.
black ops dimension too.
Yeah, and it's hard to, like, I find it hard to trust. That's why I never really resonated with messing with the entity realm, just because even if you do come across something that seems nice and lovey, you never know. It could be like a dark entity pretending to be something good, or sometimes it could be the opposite. Sometimes it could be a scary looking entity that's actually good. Who knows? But it's something that I don't have I have a limited perspective, so I can never really truly know. So I'd rather just skip the middleman and go straight to God.
I think there's a commonality amongst like shamanic experiences. I have done a lot of research into that realm of comparative religion, and one of the things they always talk about is that whether it's like Peru or like Mongolia, the tribal shaman there's a pattern to what they experience when they go into the spiritual realm, and so typically they will undergo this kind of death, rebirth, and dividing up, like the shaman gets chopped up like by the entities, and then he's assembled back together, or sometimes he's eaten and divided back up, and then goes back together. And then so when he comes back from that journey, he's a new man. So just the mere fact that experience exists in disparate cultures suggests that there's a reality to this spiritual experience.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying necessarily good, but
yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of different, in terms of the shamanic world, there's like a lot of there are some people who are pure at heart, but then because now, especially with consumerism, there's a lot of money to be made, and so a lot of shamans that have very bad intentions or huge egos go into it, and they take advantage of white Westerners looking for a spiritual experience.
I have a friend, Tristan, who he's expatriate to Ecuador, and he laughs because all the boomers like fly down there to do their spiritual shamanic journey, and it's just these like brujos that are ripping them off and like, come to my tent, bro. Yeah, come in my tent. And it's like the wives go in the tent, and he's like grabbing, feeling them up, and like, oh, that's like $3,000, man. Thank you.
It's all part of the ceremony.
All
yeah. Wow. That's crazy, man. Because actually, one of the first retreats that I went to, I found out, I can't confirm, that's why I don't want to name it just in case, but I found out from a good source that he ended up being a pedophile. And in Peru, there's a lot of those. Well, I'm sure a lot of parts of the world, but there's a lot of kind of pedophile rings, and a lot of shamans get into like the spiritual warfare. Like one might get jealous of one and go into the astral plane, throw a poison dart. And yeah, man, I've heard stories of even like literal, I'm not even talking like in the spiritual dimension, like literal frogs dropping from the ceremonial hut, like physically.
Wow.
Yeah, man, like there's definitely some real power to this stuff, and that's why you got to be careful with this stuff, and you got to discern yourself, because I would say that at least, me being generous, I'd say at least 95% of shamans are full of caca. They're not.
Yeah, that's what Tristan says about Ecuador.
But I do believe that there are definitely some legit ones, because when you talk to the people who have it, who actually do it with honor and respect, they don't agree with how the majority of how psychedelic ceremonies are done. And especially like some shamans even will mix a whole bunch of plants together, which can muddle up the energies instead of just sticking with the one and giving too big of a dose. Or there's so many factors, man. And it's something that we just don't understand yet.
Right.
I don't even know if he
Right.
will, but yeah, you talked about like Terence McKenna. What specifically of what he talked about do you not resonate with?
Well, I wasn't intending to dive into the psychonauts per se, but one of the things I do is what I call the Global Elite book series, where I just go into the writings of the elite over the last century. And I tried to do that to see if there was commonality amongst like the plan that they have. And sure enough, there is. So I've done about 50 of those books now that I have lectures on. But one of the things that popped up was MK Ultra. And so I tried to read as much about that as I could, not just from conspiracy sources, but from academic sources and all that as well. So that naturally led into the realm of the psychonauts. So I'm not saying everybody who was involved in, the Leary, Ken Kesey, Hoffman, Sandow's domain, they're all working with the CIA, but there is a clear military CIA MK Ultra component to where all that comes from. Okay. So again, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but
and if you wanted to, we can continue
where I got in. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. If you wanted to, we can continue this conversation on another podcast, especially about like the Psychonaut area. But maybe we can just touch on the MK Ultra. Like, what is MK Ultra, and how did this start, and are they still continuing their operation?
Right. Well, I was just going to say that's what got me into reading McKenna and Leary and all them. But mainly about McKenna, I would disagree with kind of just his sort of pantheistic view. I think there's some problems in that worldview, and it's just kind of Gnostic, restating the Gnostic pantheistic perspective. But so MK Ultra is just a program that was birthed right around the time of World War II in the late 40s, where they wanted to look into ways to find a truth serum. So really it was a military project where they were using cannabis, they were using different mushrooms that they had found to try to see if they could get people to tell the truth. They thought, well, if we can get a truth serum, this would be, ideal for confessions or, spies who leave another country or whatever. And then the more they studied, the more they realized that, there's a lot of different possibilities here. And then Big Pharma got involved through Sandow's Pharmaceutical Corporation. Some big banks got involved. JP Morgan sent Gordon Wasson to Latin America, South America to find different types of mushrooms that could be utilized in these projects. And this is what led eventually to the synthesis of LSD. And that played a key role in a lot of different experiments in MK Ultra. But MK Ultra was just one of a whole series of projects where they were trying to study the mind and the psyche. And I mean, there's really no way to for mind control. I mean, it's just the simple.
What did they do in the experiments?
Well, we only have about half of what they did because the other half was destroyed, I think, by Helms. One of the CIA directors destroyed half of the research. Seven of the boxes survived and 7 were destroyed. And then they had the hearings, the House hearings on.
So this is all legit stuff. Like this isn't just like some crazy.
No, this is all public. This is all public documents because they had hearings, right? So the House hearings on the mind control project, and they supposedly shut it down. But if you read a lot of the researchers who were correct back in the 70s and 80s that wrote on it, like Walter Bower or John Marks, in their books, they said that this research isn't really shut down. It's just moving into different arenas. So, for example, MK Ultra just was renamed MK Search, and they just moved it to a different military base, and they just said it was about biological warfare.
Of course they did.
So it transferred from, psyche research and drug research to biowarfare, but it's all the same stuff. So, so some of the experiments, for example, one of the more famous ones that people know about is Midnight Climax, where the CIA contracted out to the mafia to get one of the whorehouses that the mafia owned to drug the Johns who were coming in to have their fill with the ladies of the evening. And unbeknownst to them, they were tripping balls. So that was one famous experiment where they wanted to see how the people would react to being drugged without knowing it.
Whoa.
Other experiments were, for example, Dr. Estabrooks was not so much on the drug side, but he was doing the hypnosis stuff, where he was trying to create the hypnotic courier, where you could have a split psyche, and one psyche within the DID, MPD person would know facts about, some military operation or something. And then the handler, the intelligence handler, would know the key word to bring forth that alter. Now, Estabrooks claims to have been successful in this, and this is kind of where pop culture has, birthed this whole mythology of the Jason Bourne, mind control assassin type of thing. That all comes out of real programs. As to how successful it really was, I guess that's debatable. But I would say that they probably did succeed in some of this. But in my view, the real the locus of the purpose of all this wasn't to create individual assassins. It was rather to know on a micro scale what you could do to the psyche to do that on a macro scale to the public. That's much more valuable, right, to the entities interested in this, psychological warfare, et cetera, than just being able to program an assassin. I mean, you can hire, somebody to do that. You don't need to mind control somebody to do that, although you could. The ability to control the masses through mass media is much more valuable, and they will use that MKulture research. In my view, that's what it's really about.
Whoa. Did this backfire in any way, do you think?
I mean, there have been lawsuits, and there have been people who, there's a famous clip of Bill Clinton actually apologizing for MKulture.
Oh, really?
I would take that apology with a grain of salt. I'm so sorry for what we did to you. And by the way, if you'd like to come with me on Air Force One, I'll make you happy. I'll make you right. So yeah. I wouldn't buy much into that. That was just PR. But
just for the press.
Aside from the public apologies and lawsuits, no, I don't think there have been a whole lot of repercussions. In fact, I think that most of what we see in pop culture nowadays, the toxic aspects of pop culture, that's the real MKulture. We're all under MKulture, in my view.
And is most, if not all, movies kind of in on this? Or do you think there are like some genuine directors and super famous AAA movies that are like they haven't sold their soul, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't use a sweeping statement. I think that there's a lot of people who work in movies or in the arts who are legitimate, and they're just putting out their craft and doing what they want to do from an artistic perspective. But I think that when you get into like the big studios and the big blockbusters, I think those are pretty consistently, controlled propaganda. Totally.
Wow. Christopher Nolan too? Don't say it's Christopher Nolan.
I mean, I've done a lot of analyses of Nolan's films. I mean, I don't want to speak in sweeping ways as if every single person is like fully in on some conspiracy. But again, I think that would be an oversimplification. So I like Oliver Stone. He's made some of the biggest films in Hollywood history.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that he has put out in his mind legitimate critical messages of the system, of the establishment. So I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but I think that especially in the last 10 or 20 years, generally speaking, most of the blockbusters that come out do have pretty clear social engineering, messages. I don't think there's much dispute of that. But I mean, as to Christopher Nolan's intentions, I couldn't say. I mean, I typically like his films.
Yeah, me too. I think he makes it awesome. Same with James Cameron. He's one of my favorites. But even Terminator 2, for example, I feel like in many ways that's kind of coming to fruition.
Yeah, well, the weird thing about the Terminator franchise is that if you read Annie Jacobson's book, Pentagon's Brain, which is a history of DARPA, I did a lecture on her book, and she just went to all the DARPA people and did interviews with them and a lot of the MIT people. And the way she characterized it towards the end of the book is that literally James Cameron and I forget who she mentions, Kathleen Kennedy or somebody, but some of these big producers and directors, like they were consulting with the Pentagon consistently.
Oh, really?
And it's a symbiotic thing where people from the realm of the arts will talk to people at DARPA, and people at DARPA will talk back and forth to them. So it's a both and. It's not like DARPA tells James Cameron what he has to put in there. It's like it's a back and forth. But that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, well, because I can imagine even from an artistic perspective, when you want to make an immersive movie, you want to get it right, you know. So, and James Cameron definitely seems like the person who would immerse himself in this.
Well, I think my suspicion is that when Cameron was talking to, you know, like Pentagon level people, and he was making films like T2, I mean, obviously there's not going to be like Arnold's walking around like per se, but the idea of Skynet is real. That's a real Pentagon thing. What
company do you think is like the closest to Skynet?
My view is that the space program, like NASA, that's more of a front for a inner kind of private black budget space program, which I believe was not so much about, you know what SETI is?
No, what's that?
Well, back in the 80s and 90s, there was that famous. Did you ever see that movie Contact with Matthew McConaughey?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it, unfortunately.
You ain't never seen Jodie Foster? Well, she looks like my aunt, but I'm hitting on her the whole movie.
Oh. So, all right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for
that.
No,
keep going.
I'm going to tell you I'm going to drive a Lincoln out into space. You said you like Christopher Nolan. You ever seen a Lincoln driving into space?
Anyway, so in Contact, they're at the Arecibo installment, which is this big dish that's real, where they were supposedly sending emails right out into space, hoping for alien contact. So I'm just making the point that, in my view, I tend to think a lot of that NASA alien space stuff was really more of a front for the erection of a global satellite surveillance grid, which is what they're rolling out now. So I think, what's Elon Musk's thing?
SpaceX?
Yeah, well, no, he's got his the thing that he's rolling out with the satellites. He's got a thing, I forget what's it. It's off the top of my head. Right. Skylink or something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, so I actually think that a lot of those private entities are in on that, and that it's not really about space travel. It's more so about erecting what Klaus Schwab writes about in his book. I thought I had it, but the integrated surveillance system.
And do you think this is all connected to, like, MK Ultra, for example? Do you think it's all? Absolutely. Yeah. And
in fact, I can prove that with the DARPA book, Annie Jacobson's book, the Rand Corporation book, Soldier of Reason by Alex Abella. And if you read John Marks's book, CIA in the Search for the Manchurian Candidate, which is one of the early critiques of MK Ultra, the last chapter in John Marks's book is crucial, because he wrote this in the late 70s. He said that as MK Ultra continues, what they're going to do is strive to create the transhuman super soldier. And so that's going to be the embedding of the microchip. It's going to be all of that stuff. I mean, John C. Lilly, he was one of the first people working on implantable microchips. So he wanted to study brainwaves, and when he was doing all of his LSD research, dolphins.
Was that the guy who did the ketamine? A lot of ketamine and talked to dolphins or something? And he invented the isolation tank or something? Am I thinking of the right guy? Yeah, cool. Wow.
So John C. Lilly was part of MK Ultra.
What about Timothy Leary? Was he a part of the CIA?
Well, he was an asset that they used to promote the drug. Yeah.
Whoa.
I mean, he says that openly. Just go on YouTube.
Really?
And, yeah.
Oh, so this isn't even a.
No, it's not a conspiracy anymore. There's a clip of him talking about. He says, if you like the '60s counterculture revolution, he's like, you can thank the CIA because we gave it to you.
What? Are you serious? That's crazy.
That's serious. Yeah.
Wow. So they pushed it. Interesting. And
I'll tell you a book you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Have you heard of Dave McGowan?
No. Who's that?
So he passed away a couple years ago, but he was a researcher who wrote a book called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, and it's a It's a history of the Laurel Canyon counterculture drug scene. And his main thesis in the book, he's really the first to really pioneer the theory that not all the counterculture, but the majority of the 60s Laurel Canyon counterculture was promoted by the establishment.
Whoa. Yeah, I'll keep in touch and give us some recommendations.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
I highly recommend that. You'd like it.
Wow. And fuck, man, that's crazy. And in terms of, like, let's say MK Ultra and CIA and, you know, the powers that be who pushed Hollywood, what exactly are they promoting? Would you say they're promoting more a materialistic atheist type of view, or more along the lines of the New Age, non-duality, we're all gods kind of view?
Both. I think that we've seen since the advent of Darwinism and naturalism a heavy push for atheism and materialism, but I think that's kind of giving way to what they want to push with this kind of New Age stuff. And by the way, a lot of the people involved in the rise of the internet were also connected to the Esalen Institute, which is the ideological origin of the New Age. So the whole New Age movement comes out of Esalen, and that was all funded by the establishment. It's a big think tank out in Big Sur, New Agey kind of thing.
Right, because they both promote moral relativism at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
so in my view, that's where they want to go, is to promote a new kind of a new religion that's all just manufactured, made up.
And do you think that's because people are just kind of breaking away from materialism because you can have a direct spiritual experience? And because I've known a lot and heard of a lot of atheists who have completely let that go and believe in God, right, because they've had a direct spiritual experience.
I think that atheism and materialism, they function like a wrecking ball. So you can promote those in a society. If you look at the history of, like, the Bolsheviks and how Bolshevism changed Russia, if you read Anthony Sutton's book, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, you can see these as ideological technologies to wreck a region, but they don't have a whole lot of holding power. So humans are kind of naturally driven towards the divine. They don't stay with atheism very long, and that's why it usually fades away and gives way to something more like New Age, something like initiatic religions, etc.
Yeah, because it seems like atheism or materialism is sort of like a very idealistic, in your head sort of philosophy that doesn't translate well in reality, at least long term. You know, if you are on a genuine search for truth.
And when people try to enforce that and make reality submit to that weird ideal, that's what leads to the mass chaos and the death in those regimes, because it doesn't work.
Has there been any successful atheist or atheist society?
I guess it depends on how we define success. I mean, if you define success as like material wealth, high standard of living, I mean, most of the modern Western world is more or less atheistic. I mean, you can have a religious view, but most people don't really take it very seriously. So if success means, standard of living in a sense, yes, but, what you value, your value judgments are going to be conditioned by your worldview. So.
Right. And sometimes, what works in the short term doesn't necessarily hold up long term.
Or maybe it's not a good thing to have. Like maybe having a whole bunch of junk isn't necessarily a good thing.
It's true. Like, can you stillman the atheist or the materialism worldview? Like, what makes it so appealing, do you think, for people?
A combination of things make it appealing. I think that if you get rigid, stultified, empty traditions in the realm of religion, it gives way usually to the reaction of some form of atheism, rationalism. No better example than the Enlightenment. I mean, you had legitimate corruption in the papacy, in the Western religious sphere at that time. and that led to the Protestant Reformation. It led to the Enlightenment. And so there's a legitimate criticism and problem, but the problem is that humans oftentimes swing in the pendulum to the opposite. So it's like, oh, if the papacy's bad, then we got to be atheists and destroy all religion.
Ego backlash.
So you get that sort of dialectical extreme, and so that's one reason why atheism is successful, is because there is legitimate corruption in the institutional religion is what I'm trying to say. It's also, I think, appealing on another level because it appeals to baser desires. So you feel like, I've been repressed, so now I can, put my PP anywhere, and that's freedom. But the problem is that if we reduce freedom to just like, biological sexual drives, we're in a way becoming another type of slave. So then we're enslaved to our biological drives, and we don't have self-control. So that's another danger. And actually, there's a lot of history in terms of psychological warfare where, just from a perspective of warfare, you can debase your enemy through enslaving him, through exposing him to toxic culture. There's a lot of different ways that can be done. So that's part of why atheism becomes successful. And I would add that really powerful, wealthy people can actually pay to have atheism promoted.
Really? What do you mean by that?
Well, for example, when the Bolsheviks took over, they were funded by very wealthy Western elites.
Who's the Bolsheviks?
So this is the revolution in Russia when Russia became atheist. Now they weren't immediately Soviet, so you had this period when the atheistic revolution in Russia happens, 1917. It leads to a few provisional governments. Then you get like the Trotsky, Lenin, Stalin stuff. Then it becomes the Soviet, right? So what I'm saying is that's kind of a classic example of very wealthy Western interests, elites in Wall Street, in banking institutions. They funded that revolution. You can't have a revolution without money. Like all revolutionaries need money. Even if they're idealistic and they don't believe in capitalism, they need money. So if you just think about it from because some people think, well, that's conspiratorial. This is too conspiratorial. Well, just think about it in terms of warfare. Like if you wanted to defeat an opponent, a rival country, a rival village, one way you could do it is to foster division within their society.
Right. Or introduce something that kind of fragments the...
Exactly.
It's sort of like how, the colonialists just gave alcohol to the indigenous people all over the world.
There you go.
It happens right here in Australia,
The Opium Wars.
Yeah. And, all right, but what about, atheism? Isn't that just pro-science? Isn't religious just some primitive ideology that we need to let go that's just destroying society? Like, don't we need to grow up and be rational?
No, because there's no such thing in my view. There's no such thing as there's no such thing as a neutral position. So every worldview has some governing assumptions that relate to what you could call philosophy. So the domain of knowledge, epistemology, ethics, right and wrong, and metaphysics, what's real and what's not real. So even if you think you're just a purely neutral, scientifically minded person, you're going to have some kind of assumptions that govern how you interpret the facts of those three domains. And that's a worldview. And so there's no such thing, in my view, as a purely neutral scientific worldview, because just take, for example, should we follow scientific truth? Well, yeah, right. If you have that view, you say that we should follow truth, that science can give some approximation of truth. Well, a should is a value judgment, right? So already we see that the position is value laden, right? And so that's the point, is that you can't have a purely neutral position. You're already assuming oughts and shoulds, but science can't tell you what you ought and should do.
So we just assume, right?
Right, but like just studying objects or phenomena, which is what science is supposed to do. I mean, yes, you have a theory and you have, you scientific method, et cetera. But what I'm saying is that you can't get value judgments from events or from objects. So that's part of your interpretive scheme that you use to interpret the world. The way Hume said it was that you can't get an ought from an is. So science can investigate the world, tell you what things are the case, but it can't tell you what you ought to do. And this is the problem with a purely scientism-based worldview, is that, I mean, what if I come up with a theory, let's say that pure on the basis of pure science, quote unquote, that I believe I'm the highest evolved creature, and I should pick a harem of women to be in my cult, and I should murder everyone else in the world. And then I can be the god emperor of a future race, like a Moonraker Hugo Drax type of worldview. Now, you may say, well, that's crazy, but how can you tell me that's wrong, right? You can't, on a basis of scientific data, right? This is called in epistemology the problem of the underdetermination of data. It can't tell you which paradigm or system is the one to pick or prefer.
Yeah, this is sort of like where the non-dualist and the materialist kind of share the view of there is no such thing as right or wrong. But they say this ideally, but in reality, they clearly do believe in a right or wrong, because otherwise, why shouldn't you just do whatever you want?
Well, don't they believe by saying that you ought to accept their argument that there's no such thing as right and wrong? Well, once you said ought, you've entered into the domain of ethics.
Is there something like numbers, for example? Is that something that we just kind of assume? Like, is mathematics like this objective reality, sort of like the Mandelbrot? Like, can you just go into maybe a little bit on the metaphysics of numbers, and what does that say about reality?
I think so. Absolutely. I would say that numbers are a great example of something that we don't have empirical evidence for. They're obviously not equatable to matter. And in all forms of language, meaning, predication, sentences rely on the ability to pick out objects as one thing and to predicate distinctions to them to point out the many. So even sentences presuppose number in some way to be meaningful or useful. And so we know that numbers and basic numbers like 1, 2, and 3, and the tetrad that, the tetractys and so forth that come from that, as Pythagoras argued, they're fundamental to human experience, to how we can speak of and understand the world. And they're an easy way to show that the world cannot be reduced to physicalism or pure materialism. And so, yes, I would say that we have to assume them in predication. And I don't even think that's controversial. Now, people will debate whether that means numbers are real, but I'm glad you mentioned the Mandelbrot set, because that's a classic example of something that is not in the human mind. It's in nature, but not in an idealized form. So there's a theoretical infinity-related set. There's many of them, but if you took any Mandelbrot set and you put it into an XY graph and you show that pattern, it's not something that can be contained in the human mind, right? And we know that it's real. So what this shows is that numbers are not social constructs. Mathematics is not a social construct. It's not made up by the human mind. It's discovered, right? So Roger Penrose, the famous mathematician, this is one of the points that he makes about mathematical objects, is that they're not inventions, they're discoveries. And that means that the human mind can't be the source and the limit of numerical objects.
I would agree with that. And does this kind of dissolve the materialistic paradigm? What's the argument against this?
I mean, I think it's one of many arguments that dissolves the materialistic paradigm. I think the argument about the naturalist or determinist fallacy disproves it, which is, if you saw the debate I did with JF, that's essentially the argument I made with him, which is just that if what you're saying is true, you couldn't posit that it's true, because you would be merely a determined chemical reaction. And so there's no such thing as trueness or you as an agent making decisions. and getting royalties for your book or whatever, because you're just part of a determined causal chain. So there's no will, agency, or personhood. It's just what is. It's just chemical reactions. And so there's an illusion of choice, right? Sam Harris, he makes this kind of an argument.
Yep.
I think that is another easy way to refute materialism. There's a lot of different routes that you could take the refutation of materialism, meaning itself, concepts. If you try to reduce, so you and I are having an exchange. For meaningful exchange, we have to have some information, content that's conveyed, through voice, through hearing, through vocal cords, blah, blah, blah. But the content and meaning of the sentences that I'm saying to you that are going into your ear, none of that is reducible to the sound wave or to the brain states. Yeah. So where is the content in this exchange? That's another, I think, powerful, easy refutation of the materialist paradigm. But there's many of these.
I would love to see you debate Richard Dawkins. He's a funny character.
Maybe one day. I mean, Matt Dillahunty and I had an interesting exchange. But
yeah. I watched that. How did you think that went? Because every time, like, if you read the comment section, it's funny how, like, depending on which echo chamber you're listening from, because you go on his comment section and it's like, oh, Jay got owned, and then you go on your comment section and it says the opposite. Like, how do you think that went, honestly?
It went pretty much the way that I expected. I've been debating the atheist materialist paradigm for about 20 years, so I don't think I'm ever going to hear any argument I haven't already heard. So most of what Matt said, I'd kind of already heard. I think Matt's a great orator. He's got a lot of rhetorical skills, but I think he really fell short when it came to the conceptual categories that I was making the argument on. So I don't think he understood those. He didn't know what I meant when I was talking about different ways to prove different types of things. He just kind of assumed that everything has to be proven in an empirical way.
Right.
It's very easy to disprove that.
Right. It's like you have to play the game you have to play the rules in my game, Yeah, it seems like
so basically, just simply put, I don't think he grasped what the transcendental argument was.
Was it in your debate where I don't know if maybe it was a different video, but I remember him saying that porn addiction isn't real. And that's sort of like, whoa, hang on. I'm pretty sure, even scientifically speaking, it's a very real addiction, but he outright said that. So
I don't know. He may have said that, and I just don't remember. I don't recall.
Yeah.
But maybe he did. But yeah, that seems odd.
Something that stuck out.
I'm not sure why that would be controversial. Like, that's like, is that controversial?
I feel like it is, because it's like, I don't know. Maybe he just wants to justify jacking off and doesn't want to see anything wrong with it. Who knows? I mean, we all, porn's very enjoyable, but it's obviously, I believe anyway, that it kind of drains your life force, and it's probably not good. I think most people would agree with that, no matter what ideology you believe in. I think it's a scientific fact at this stage. Anyone
who has a PhD in Kummerology will tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. Where do you think this is going, man? Like, just in terms of because you made a video on the Great Reset. I haven't had a chance to see it yet. What is the Great Reset? Where is this society going? What's the next phase?
So this is a plan that relates to technocracy. It's the idea that they can implement a more or less an AI-based world government. And to do that, they kind of have to collapse or show the impossibility of the previous systems working. So they'll use a lot of buzzwords like sustainability and green and all this kind of stuff. But really, that's just window dressing to bring in what Klaus outlines in his book, Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is to say that we've seen previous revolutions, the mechanization of industry, industrial revolution, blah, 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 computer revolution. Now we're going to have this fourth industrial revolution, which will be the transition to AI, to smart cities, to sustainability, to reduced population, to no property ownership. So he's very candid that won't own any property.
You serious?
You'll be more.
Is this is this like a legitimate plan that's going to happen? Do you think this will be implemented, or do you think we need as a collective, we need to fight it? Fuck, man, that's not.
So the 8 points that he gives, according to the World Economic Forum, let's see, I thought I wrote it down, but so they put out a video that went viral, and then they deleted it. But the article that's the basis of the video is still up, so you can go read the article. It's all public. The points are you won't own property. Everything will be rented via Amazon and drones. It's called the circular. This is called the circular economy. The second point is there won't be meat. You'll have like rationed food. Vegan diet with rationing, no meat. Borders will go away. There'll be more of a integrated global community where you're all under a centralized AI government, social credit score. What else does he say? The West will have to collapse, basically. He says it'll be tested to the breaking point. He says that there will be alien life and an alien mythology. That's literally all in. Yeah.
Oh man, I got to read this article. That's insane. Sounds like something from a science fiction movie.
This is from the wealthiest people on the planet. So.
Wow, man, no meat. I don't know if Australians are going to fly with that. We have a lot of.
Well, you guys also have a lot of vegans down there, so they're already pushing that vegan.
It's true. I actually had a crocodile the other week for the first time.
What does it taste like?
It was like a fishy, tough chicken. It's quite nice, and because they're even kangaroos, like they're everywhere, man. It's actually very sustainable to eat kangaroo, and it's nice.
My dad killed a snake once. I had a snake one time. We live in Tennessee. You see snakes a lot. So.
Did it taste like chicken?
It was the same way. It was real meaty, gamey, fishy, weird taste.
Oh, man, I can see, like, where I live is, like, I'm on the outskirts of Melbourne, and Melbourne is definitely the most kind of, like, feminist, socialist, kind of ultra-left kind of culture. So that's why I'm actually getting the hell out of here. Because I can see, actually, we spent millions and millions of dollars to change the traffic lights so that it's a female. Yeah, that's what's important to us. It still makes me angry, actually, when I see. I'm like, really? And isn't that sexist in and of itself? Because then you assume that women have to wear dresses. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation.
Oh, that's a good point. Wow.
Yeah, man.
That's sad. So you're moving to like the countryside of Australia?
Yeah, I'm pretty much. I'm on the country. I'm like, if I went 5 minutes east, I wouldn't be Melbourne anymore. I'm very farmland, very close. Like I have a friend who owns a farm. You know, he's like a 4th generation beekeeper. He has eggs, so I've got access to good people who have land. But I want to go up north, kind of Queensland. Yeah, just away from the cities, kind of thing. Because I don't like where it's going.
I was city based last year, and then now I'm in the rural area of Tennessee, so I'm like 2 hours outside of Nashville. So
nice. How's that going for you?
Very rural.
Yeah. How are the people there?
I mean, I don't like the Tennessee weather, except, I mean, I'm happy to be rural, but I was in Florida previously, so the weather's a lot better in Florida. I like beaches, warmth, but...
Have you found like your mental health kind of just increased ever since you moved away from the cities?
Well, I wasn't in a big city. I was outside of Jacksonville. So I was in St. Augustine, which is a really, really nice city. So, I mean, I would prefer to be in St. Augustine than Tennessee, but I moved to Tennessee. I got a good deal on a house, was one of the main reasons I moved to Tennessee. So,
yeah, well, that's why I'm going to go on with my girlfriend to travel up north and just, suss out the area, see which place kind of fits and where we're going to move. But no, Australia is beautiful, man. I'm actually really... I know that we're trapped here, but it's like it's not the worst country in the world to be trapped in. You know?
I've heard it's awesome. I mean,
it is.
My wife she's been there. She spent, I think, 2 or 3 weeks there. She said it was really cool.
Oh, nice. Whereabouts did you go?
Jamie, where'd you go?
What's that?
Where? Byron Bay.
Ah, yeah, the hippie capital of Australia.
Yeah.
It's nice. Like I wouldn't live there.
The vegans and
the pretentious
Vegemite,
white...
mate.
Yeah.
Everybody eating their Vegemite. How often do you hear people doing the worst accents? Do you hear that
all the time? Actually, the only American that I've heard who's nailed the Aussie accent is Robert Downey Jr. The only one I've heard in my life. He nails it. Everyone else, It's like it's a little bit too cartoony, Crocodile Dundee.
It's overboard, mate. If I was to try to talk like Mel, I'll get me Vegemite.
You sound like how Simpsons impersonate Australians.
So this is the Simpsons version. Okay.
Call that a knife.
It's the same way if you live in the South.
Yeah.
When you hear people in the U.S. try to do the Southern accent, it's terrible. It's like, well, I'm going to go down to Tennessee. It's like, dude, you're way overboard.
Way cartoonish, yeah. But man, I love being here, man. I think that we have a very special land here, and just a lot of space, man, and just the wildlife and kangaroos, and they're everywhere. So I don't know how they're going to stop people from eating kangaroos, because they're everywhere, man. Like, it's not hard. Like, even like if you just drive 30 minutes through any direction, you're most likely going to see a couple dead kangaroos on the side of the road.
Well, I think my suspicion is that so they have sort of decade-based plans. So the goal, there's like 2030 goals, 2050 goals. So my suspicion would be like the full implementation of that would be when they have kind of, global drone surveillance force. So it would be like drones that would watch you and surveil you and see what you're up to. So that would be how they would try to stop you.
Don't say that.
I don't think this ultimately. I don't think it'll ultimately be successful, but I think that's what they would try to do.
They're trying to do, right? Yeah, because even like I know it even triggers people. It's like, how can you talk about spirituality and have psychedelic experiences and still eat animals and all that kind of stuff? And I went vegan, man, for like 3 years. And my health completely fell apart, and you always hear the same thing. Like, you didn't do it right. And like, actually I was eating healthier than 99% of people on the planet, and my mental health fell apart. I went pale, and like, I looked like a junkie, man, pretty much. And it was actually my girlfriend, who was vegan at the time, who told me, like, you might need to actually eat some animals. And this is when when I switched to eating like, and in Australia as well, we're very lucky that I think at least 70% of our cattle is grass-fed. So when you throw the argument of like, but most of the grains and soy gets fed to the cattle anyway, it's like, not where I live. So that doesn't really apply to the cow that I eat. And man, it just changed my life completely. Right. I had like a soul-gasm in a lot of ways, and I got color back in my face. I was like centered, and it just changed the game for me. I haven't experienced not even a season of depression for more than 2 years at all. Like, not even an issue for me. That was like the last piece of the pie that I needed to have. And
I totally agree. I was never vegan, but I was eating a lot of vegetables for a long time, and I was having gut issues. And I listened to Michaela Peterson and my buddy Tristan do some shows. And shout out to Tristan over at Primal Edge Health. I thought he was crazy, but he talked me into trying out carnivore keto, and like all my issues went away. So
wow, you should try some kangaroo. It's really good.
Come visit Australia. If we don't have like total lockdowns forever, I will.
Yeah, man, I'll hook you up if you end up coming down here. But it's something that, and I get it. I understand the psychology of the vegan, and I like I said, I was there. I understand, and I don't even know if it's bad for 100% of the population, because I don't want to be dogmatic about it either, because some people can really go years without it. I don't know if that's the case, but apparently some people can go be healthy with it. But for me,
I don't know why you wouldn't want an optimal diet though. Like, I mean, you could probably survive eating like cans of beans for a long time, but just because you can do it, like, well, is that a reason to do it? I mean,
and okay, actually, this is a good segue, because some would say, but we're all one, man. Why would you eat animals? You're just eating yourself. You're just eating a sentient being that doesn't want to die. Like, I've heard you criticize the all is one theory. Can you just like go into that a little bit? What do people mean by all is one? Hey?
So one thing philosophy will help you, not you, but people in general do, is make distinctions. Okay. And a lot of bad thought and bad philosophy and worldviews is based on the inability to distinguish things. So are we all one? Well, there's a sense in which I think all humans share a common human nature. We all possess humanness, as Aristotle would say, but that doesn't mean that we are all identical, or that all living beings are identical. So there could be distinctions in different types of living beings. So I don't believe, that animals are not identical to us. They're not our ancient cousins. I do believe that we have the right to eat meat. And I think that our own I mean, even without talking about theology or religion or anything like that, just on the basis of biology and physiognomy, I think it's pretty obvious that our gut is designed to find the most nutrient proficient means through eating meat. Right? I mean, our intestines are designed to get a lot of nutrients through meat fat. So,
but dude, you're just eating low vibration, man. You're eating dead animals. It's making you be on.
I mean, if the low vibrations remove my health problems and my irritable bowel syndrome, then I'll be a low vibrating dude. I'll be a, you know, I'll be that low base vibration guy.
Like,
but
didgeridoo vibration. Yeah.
Don't Buddhists chant a low vibration? I don't know, but yeah, I don't buy into that. I mean, I will admit that one thing that vegans do point out is that our ethic of how we eat is tied to our overall worldview. I don't know their conclusion, but they are correct on that point. And
like even factory farming, for example, like I'm opposed to that. I don't. Ever since I introduced meat back into my diet, animal flesh, I haven't bought any factory farmed meat at all. And like, but again, I'm also lucky that I live in Australia and I have access to like really primo wild caught meat. So, yeah.
Right, we can do that too here in Tennessee. Like it's easy to go out to the Amish, cattle, cutting place, butcher, or whatever. My buddy Tristan, he did it the right way too. When he moved to Ecuador, he basically just set up his own little farm that's like a self-sustaining farm out in the middle of Ecuador. So, I mean, I think that's a much better way to go about this than definitely don't want to be in a city like relying on, these big chains. I think that's a nightmare. So if you can, not everybody can do it, but if you can be, extricated from those big city things, I think it's best, because I don't think in the next few years things are going to be going in a positive direction for like the mega cities. I think those are going to be bad places to be. Personally, it's just
seems like revelation's coming. That's what I'm feeling. Yeah.
It could be. Yeah.
And in terms of like, let's say, where can we take this? All right, non-duality. Why? How do you know that I'm not God, really?
So again, I would make a distinction between different types of things and different aspects to things. So we can share something in common that's a real metaphysical principle. For example, you and I are males. I assume you're
non-binary, dude. Yeah.
Exactly right. So like we share that in common. That's a real, I would say, metaphysical reality that exists objectively in us, but it's also had by each of us in a unique way. Like I'm a different guy from you. You're a different guy from me. So you're the person, Tom. I'm the person, Jay. We're both males and we both share common humanity, but we're unique instantiations of that.
Right. And so I can never know like your true essence, for example. Like I can kind of analyze your energy and your actions, but I can't really transfer into your consciousness and really understand what it is to be Jay.
Right. And so I would say that's an example of what in philosophy is called the problem of the one and the many. So
what was that again? Can you repeat that? Sorry.
So in the history of Western philosophy, especially, and even in Eastern philosophy too, you have what's called the problem of the one and the many.
Okay.
So is reality fundamentally one? Is it fundamentally many? Or both? And the worldview that I have is that there's both things are true at once. So objects, people, the world, there's a real unity that they share, but there's also at the same time real distinctions and particularity. And so a lot of the Far Eastern and New Age philosophies fall over into one side of that dialectic where they want everything to be one. Oh, all of humankind's problem is particularity. Like I think that I'm an individual, and so I need to meditate and destroy my psyche, my individuality. I would say that's a false problem. So the problem is not whether things are one or many. Man's problems are moral, right? It's not a metaphysical problem of particularity and non-duality. Now, again, I'm just trying to be nuanced here and say that we just don't locate man's problem in the fact that there's dualities and distinctions. In other words, there's nothing wrong with male, female, black, white, night, day. Those are complementary. They're not like exclusionary.
Exactly. It's not that they're in a constant spiritual battle.
They should.
They harm. Well, yeah, exactly. It depends. When things go into chaotic disarray, then it can be in opposition. But usually, I feel like they're meant to harmonize with each other, work off each other. Because even in Hermeticism, I know that's like a kind of occult philosophy, but even that completely disproves the whole notion of you are God, and it explains the paradox between like free will determinism, the all, and the individual. And that's actually what I really appreciated of that, because this Hermeticism is supposed to be like this Eastern sort of thing, but even that disproves the whole notion of non-duality. Because I feel like the non-dualists, they're just basically on the other side of the coin of a materialist. The materialist is just only focusing on matter, on the physical, and that's all there is. And then the non-dualist is like, matter doesn't exist. All there is God. Everything is God. To my, my balls, this fucking rock over here, this house, it's all God, man. There is no good and evil.
God is the bunion on your shoe, on your foot.
Yeah, exactly.
We are all Joe Rogan's bunion, dude.
No, so we would say, I have an Orthodox perspective, so we would say that there's a lot of both ands and not either ors. So I would say God does permeate the created order, but God's not identical to the created order. So it's a both and. I would say that humans can participate in divinity and be like God, but that doesn't mean we're identical to God.
Right.
So those are some important distinctions that a lot of the Far Eastern religions and the materialists, they, like you said, they fall into one side of that dialectic of either or. And we just typically tend to not want to do dialectics, which I will say that like Zen type philosophies, they have the right idea in avoiding dialectics, but I don't think they have the solution to how.
And they have a lot of good points. And I kind of, even with Buddhism, for example, that's where I kind of started really breaking apart from the atheistic worldview. So there's a lot of value from there, but you just got to just keep going, be honest.
Yeah, I would say there's based on the questions you're asking, there's a good book called Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future by Father Seraphim Rose.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's a really good book that critiques those Far Eastern views. And he, before he became a monk, he was actually a student of Taoism. So he was like doing his PhD on, I think, Chinese language and Taoism, like that. So he took it very seriously. And then he, eventually ended up becoming an Orthodox monk. But it's a really good book. It's worth reading.
But even like I appreciate a lot of Taoist philosophies, but even I remember seeing a video of someone claiming to be a Taoist, and he's all about not resisting. Whatever happens in the universe, just let it happen, man. But then the guy asked him, like, all right, so if the Nazis came and made you kill people, would you resist? Yes. Well, you're not a Taoist. Boom. And then that just goes to that ideal reality versus actual reality, like in practice. And that's what I kind of find. And even with the whole God thing, like a metaphor that I like to use, and this is what in the Kabbalion uses actually, it's like when a human creates a digital world. Let's say Stan Lee creating the Marvel Universe, for example. The Marvel Universe is not Stan Lee, but it has the essence of his being. You know what I mean? It's not that Spider-Man is identical to the creator. And the same with us. It's like if a painter paints a painting, they're not identical, but it's kind of has our essence. And I don't know, it's sort of like a similar metaphor of how we're in the likeness of God, but we're not exactly identical.
Well, yeah, you would say that. So a lot of what you're saying, so a lot of the Hermetic tradition in my research, a lot of the esoteric tradition of the West basically boils back down to some form of Platonism or Neoplatonism.
What's that?
And I would say that there's a lot.
Neoplatonism? I'm not familiar.
So after Plato, when you get into the first, second, third centuries of the early Christian era, there was a lot of debate and theological discourse between the budding Christian church of that time and various flavors of Platonists. So there's Plotinus, there's Iamblichus, there's these different figures that wrote a lot on kind of commenting on what Plato had said. And so sometimes this is called Middle Platonism or Neoplatonism. And so these figures tried to really continue the Hellenic approach as opposed to what Christianity was saying in terms of like the Bible and so forth. And sometimes there's overlap, obviously, but my analysis of the Western Hermetic tradition is that it's just kind of other instantiations or iterations of Neoplatonism. So if you really want to understand Hermeticism, you have to read like Dionysius. Yeah, you have to read Plotinus, Dionysius, Iamblichus, these characters, Proclus, because they're the skeletal outline for which all of the Hermeticists draw from.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah, that sounds fascinating, man. I'll definitely go to.
So if we looked into that, right, so that skeletal outline, that gives us the basic structure that everybody's kind of pulling from to understand the world. And what you were talking about earlier with like Mandelbrot sets and stuff. Yeah, so I mean, there's aspects to which the Platonic view is correct, but I think that there's limitations and problems in the Platonic view that are very problematic that Platonism can't overcome. And I think that a lot of the early Christian philosophers, Dionysius, Maximus the Confessor, they took what was good from that, transformed it, and explained how actually the fullness of that makes more sense in Christ, the Logos. So I know that's kind of a lot of stuff there, but just start with something like The Divine Names by Dionysius, and you'll see what I mean.
Yeah, we can go.
It's not that long of a work, but it's really good.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check it out. I didn't know that was the skeleton of the Hermetic laws.
I think that's the case. I mean, I'm sure people would disagree, but that's how I would. And I've read a lot of the Hermeticists. I know what they're talking.
Like I've only really read the Hermetic laws. I'm sure there are like deeper works going into it, but it's definitely something that it kind of marries logic and reason in a lot of ways, but it's sort of like a grounded spirituality. And I like the fact that even the Hermetics would just scoff and kind of face palm at people shouting, "I am God," and I kind of like that because there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that, man, especially on the kind of the spiritual influence the community,
Right.
And their whole basis is, but I experienced it, but then they don't distinguish between an experience and the interpretation of that experience. It's just, this is what I felt at the time, therefore I am God. That's basically where the philosophy falls on, which doesn't make sense to me,
Yes, I think that there's always a danger of mistaking the raw subjective experience with truth itself. I mean, do we know? I mean, just because you had an experience doesn't mean that was something true. I mean, I think that like if I look back to my bad trip experience many years ago, at the time I thought, I peered into reality, dude. And now looking back, I don't know what I was talking about. I think it was idiotic. I mean, so you have to be careful to not let emotions and the raw experience be confused with actually understanding objective reality.
Yeah, and it totally depends on where you go into it. Because if you're, let's say, like a young kid with no philosophical foundation, then it's very easy to be vulnerable and just kind of suggestible to whatever comes your way. And I would agree with even like looking at myself a few years ago. I was like, oh man, I was definitely not getting a clearer grasp of perception, because you just kind of get, I don't know, it's just easy. It's like you build like this. I'm not even just talking about psychedelics. I'm just talking about spirituality in general. I feel like it's very easy to fall into this spiritual ego trap where you think that you kind of have access to truth that other people don't, and this kind of stuff. And
well, one thing that I think the temptation of the drug experience, and I'm not trying to discount everybody's experiences, because ironically, like in my case, when I had a bad trip a long time ago, it actually spurred me on to read the Bible. I didn't think I met God or anything crazy like that, but it had a roundabout way of kind of, spurring me on to do that kind of stuff. And I've met a lot of people over the years who've had similar types of experiences, but it's just there's a danger that you can be deceived, right? We can be deceived by our emotions, by by experiences. Scripture even says that Satan can appear as an angel of light. And one thing that's always missing in a lot of people's DMT trips or their experiences is the notion of deception or spiritual deception or discernment. Like, we have to be discerning of the types of spirits that we're interacting with, or who's coming to us, what they're saying. And I don't hear a lot of discernment when it comes to, people's just raw, drug experiences.
And again, it depends on which crowd you're talking about. But do you think that there can be an angel of light, or like a genuine spiritual entity that really is benevolent?
I would say that's possible, but rather that it's not the lawful means that we should use to try to interact with those kinds of spirits.
Right. Have you ever debated a psychonaut?
No.
Maybe I can be the first, just like a friendly kind of thing, because I've never,
that'd be cool.
I've never heard of anyone
That's
doing it.
That's a good idea. I've never thought about it.
I've never heard of anyone in this space who would even think about going on a debate with someone that has a different worldview. So there's a lot of kind of echo chamber stuff. I mean, hey, if anyone's listening,
we get a lot of views.
if anyone is listening, and you know someone who is actually willing to do this, I just haven't met anyone. I feel like a lot of people in this space kind of just going to get stuck in their own echo chamber and don't want to get their ideas challenged. Because I'm cool to get whatever challenged. So, and it's not even like, I don't mean like an yeah, we could do that. I think that would be cool. I can be the first psychonaut apologist.
Well, I don't know if he's an apologist, but there's a guy who's very much into shamanic type of stuff, Gnostic worldviews, and Neoplatonism. An academic named Peter King. Have you heard of him?
No. What? Okay.
I mean, I don't know if he does any debates, but he might be somebody who would be probably the most like academically minded guy in that field.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll you've given me a lot of recommendations today. I've got so many books to get through. That's been the blessing of the pandemic. Is just I've just been going like real deep into kind of philosophy and theology and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, real deep into it. What's one book the book that you'd most recommend for understanding metaphysics and numbers and that kind of stuff, like the objective reality that's the foundation of all of our rational thought?
Probably the best introductory book on just that topic would be The Mind of God by Paul Davies. That's a really good book. Okay. I got, because I saw your book recommendation list, I bought a few. I got the Quadrivium, which is really fascinating, especially about the science of music, which is like, cause I'm a musician, so it's like really mind-blowing. I bought the Trivium too. Great band as well. Awesome. Yeah, that's a classic. I always recommend that one. I think the Paul Davies book is on there, but yeah, he's just kind of looking at numbers and the structure of reality and showing how we can't reduce things to the physical. That chapter on Mandelbrot sets and Roger Penrose is the best part of that book.
Yeah, man. I reckon. Do you want to just leave it at that? Because I feel like there's a lot of ways that we can go about it, but I'd like to kind of just savor it for future discussions, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last, man.
Yeah, dude. I'll be on.
And
absolutely.
Also, as well, just for those curious, because I said that I'd be discussing with a vegan, and I'm actually going to get... he hasn't got back to me, but he did agree multiple times, so I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. But Cosmic Skeptic, have you heard of him? He's an atheist vegan, so I'm going to... assuming things go according to plan, I'll be discussing veganism with him and my thoughts, and it would be cool if that happens. I'd love to kind of like hook you guys up and see like this epic debate on atheism.
A lot of people have called for a Cosmic Skeptic debate, so I'm definitely down for that.
Hopefully, I can be the guy who makes it happen. Yeah, that'd be cool. I've never been a mediator before, but I'd love. I don't think that I'm knowledgeable enough to like really get into a theological argument. I'm just like really exploring at this stage. But there's a lot of things that I resonate with. I feel like even these last few years, I've been kind of spoken against the New Age religion a lot. And a lot of people have kind of shared their appreciation for that. And yeah, there's a lot of, I think there's a long way to go, but it's like fascinating stuff, man, going into theology and like really learning like real philosophy, not just kind of like armchair sort of like, whatever feels right, dude, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, you'll definitely be better off. You'll be much more, I think, satisfied the more grounded you get in philosophy. It's a satisfying discipline.
Grounded. Yeah, that's why even I put in my tagline like grounded spirituality, because that's what I like to have, a more grounded human, because my personal belief is that I'm a mortal being with a limited mind, but some spiritual people wouldn't agree with that. It seems kind of obvious. Like
you need to recognize that I'm God, bro.
Yeah.
If you don't recognize that I'm God and that you're me because we're all God, then I'm going to destroy you, even though you don't exist because you're me. No,
yeah, man. We'll leave it at that. And like I said, we'll discuss on a further discussion, and I think I might be YouTube's first psychedelic apologist. We'll see. At least for the one discussion.
That's interesting. If anybody does, by the way, since the holidays are coming up, if you want signed copies, if you go to my website, Jason Ellis, there's a shop, and then you can get all the copies are signed copies, and then have a subscription service, and people can subscribe to get the full talks and lectures. I think there's an archive of like 5 years of material there, so
nice, man.
A lot of content.
I'll link your website in the description box below, and if anyone listening, you have any things that you don't agree with or any challenges that you want to bring up, please feel free to comment, and we can kind of tackle it the next time. I think we've kind of just got started. There's a lot of doors that we open that we can really go down, and yeah, man, that's it. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope it was fruitful for people listening at home, and it was a pleasure, dude.
Yeah, man, and follow me on YouTube, Jay Dyer on YouTube.
Of course.
So.
All right, so I'll link your website and your YouTube channel.
Awesome, thanks, dude.
All right, brother.
All right, have a good evening.
You too, man. Have a good one. Bye.